right, let's be real for a sec. When was the last time you actually like sat down with a physical newspaper? You know, cover to cover, or even just one full article online without like getting totally sidetracked by a million other things.
Yeah, I know, right? It's a lost art.
Totally. These days, it's all about audio, right? Podcast, even that text-to-speech thing that reads stuff to you.
So convenient, though.
The best. But here's a thought. What if I told you that just choosing to listen to the news instead of reading it could actually change how you understand it?
Interesting.
Even if it's like word for word the same info.
Okay, now you've got me really curious.
Well, get this. There's some really fascinating research on this exact thing. We're diving into a 2024 paper today by Melumad, Meyer, and Kim.
Okay.
And they did a ton of work on this. We're talking 9 whole experiments.
9. They were busy.
They were determined to get to the bottom of this listening versus reading thing.
So what did they find out? What happens in our brains when we switch between reading and listening to the news?
Well, they discovered this thing called selective attention.
Selective attention.
Basically, it means that when we listen to something, our brains don't process all the parts equally. We tend to latch on to certain bits more strongly.
So it's not like we just ignore the rest. It's more like some things just grab our attention more than others.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But what kind of things tend to stick out?
Well, it's usually the stuff that has a strong emotional pull.
Emotions. Gotcha. And we all know how much the news loves to play in our emotions, right?
Oh, tell me about it.
But it's not just any emotion that grabs our attention more when we listen, is it? It's usually the negative stuff. Bad news really does seem to stick around.
You're preaching to the choir. It's like that saying, bad news travels fast. But apparently it travels even faster and sticks around longer when we hear it.
And that's precisely what this study found. There's a clear negativity bias when it comes to audio news.
A negativity bias?
Yeah, meaning even if a news story presents a balanced view with both good and bad points, just listening to it might make you see the whole thing more negatively.
Wow, seriously. Compared to reading that same info.
Exactly.
Okay, that's kind of creepy when you think about it. Why is that, though? What's happening in our brains that makes us, like, Velcro to the negative stuff when we're listening?
It's all about those cognitive resources, or brain power. Think about it. When you're reading, you're in the driver's seat. You can slow down, go back, even skip parts you don't care about. You're in control. But when you're listening, you're along for the ride, right?
Yeah.
You're at the mercy of the speakers, pace, tone, all of it. And your brain is working hard to keep up.
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yes, exactly.
You're trying to catch every drop, but some of it's bound to splash away.
And the research shows that all this listening effort takes a toll. It actually leads to a higher cognitive load than reading, especially when the information is dense or complicated.
Cognitive load, so like our brains are basically working overtime just to keep up.
Pretty much. And because of that, we have less mental energy left to really think critically about what we're hearing. And that's when we become more susceptible to just latching on the most emotionally charged bits of information. And guess what kind of information packs the biggest emotional punch?
The negative stuff.
Bingo. It's like our brains are wired to pay attention to those danger signals.
So basically our brains are stuck in like caveman mode, always on the lookout for danger.
In a way, yeah. That ancient wiring is still there, even if we're not dodging predators anymore. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is. But hold on a sec. It's not all doom and gloom, right? You said listeners can be swayed by positive information too. How does that work if our brains are so busy freaking out about the negative stuff?
This is where things get really interesting. One of the study's most surprising findings was that while we might have a negativity bias, our brains also seem to be wired for, like, the unexpected.
Okay.
So when positive information was presented as the outlier, the thing that stood out from the rest, it actually grabbed the listener's attention even more than if they had read the same info.
It's like our brains saying, wait a minute, something positive in all this doom and gloom. Tell me more.
Precisely. And because it's unexpected, it really sticks with us. So it seems like while we might have a negativity bias overall, our brains are also designed to perk up and pay attention when something positive breaks through the noise.
That's actually kind of encouraging.
Right.
Okay, so we've established that negativity can really loom large when we're listening to the news. But did the researchers actually test this out, like in a real-world scenario?
Oh, absolutely. They designed this clever experiment where they told people about a totally made-up shampoo ingredient. Let's call it LS.
LS.
Yeah, just to make it simple.
Okay, I'm following.
So they told people about both the good and bad sides of this LS. On the plus side, it could make your hair super clean and shiny, but there was a chance it could irritate your skin.
Uh-oh.
Right, sounds like a risky shampoo to me.
Oh.
But here's the kicker. Some people listened to this information about LS while others read it.
Okay, and what happened?
Well, you can probably guess where this is going. The people who listened to the information about LS were way less likely to want to use a product containing it, even though they were given both the good and bad points.
So even though the info was balanced, the negative stuff, that potential for skin problems, it just stuck with them more because they heard it.
Exactly. And that, my friend, is the negativity bias in action. It's not about completely ignoring the positive. It's that the negative just tends to leave a stronger mark when it comes through our ears.
Wow. So this isn't just some abstract thing. This could actually, affect our choices.
Oh, absolutely.
Like which shampoo we decide to buy.
Without us even realizing it.
So it's like, even if the information is technically neutral, just hearing it can kind of tip the scales towards the negative, huh? But I'm wondering, does the way we listen matter too? Is there a difference between listening to a podcast where you can pause or rewind and, say, just catching a news snippet on the radio?
You're right on the money with that. The researchers actually looked at that too. They compared podcasts, where you have that control, to traditional radio, which is just a constant stream.
So that goes back to that control factor we were talking about earlier. With reading, you can set the pace, but listening is different.
It is. And what they found was that when people had less control over how the info was coming at them, that negativity bias was even more prominent.
It's like our brains are stuck in overdrive, just grabbing onto whatever is loudest and most attention-grabbing. And more often than not, that's the bad news.
It's like we're wired for that breaking news alert, even if it's not actually a matter of life or death anymore. But this is actually good news in a way.
Really? How so?
Well, just understanding that this bias exists is a huge step toward being smarter news consumers.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about sticking our heads in the sand and ignoring anything negative.
Right.
But it's about recognizing that our brains might be giving the bad stuff a little too much weight, especially when we're just passively listening.
So how do we fight that? Do we have to, ditch all our podcasts and go back to reading the news in total silence?
Nah, not necessarily. It's all about balance and, just being aware. If you love getting your news from podcasts, awesome. Just be mindful of that potential for negativity bias. Maybe try bringing in some other news sources that come from different perspectives.
Mix it up a bit.
Yeah. Or make an effort to find some stories with more positive spin every now and then.
Okay, so balance is key. What about, how we listen? Any tips there?
Yeah, for sure. When you are listening to the news, try to be really present. Really engage with what you're hearing. Don't just let it wash over you while you're, doing the dishes or whatever.
So it's like anything else. A balanced media diet is key.
100%.
And just like with food, we've got to pay attention not just to what we're consuming, but how. Are we really present with it, or are we just letting it filter in without thinking?
That's a great point. Because we're bombarded with information nonstop these days, and it's so easy to just get swept away by whatever's thrown at us.
Especially those headlines. Clickbait is real, people. But knowing about this negativity bias can help us hit the brakes a little. We can actually choose to think critically about the information we're taking in and make sure we're getting the whole picture.
Exactly. So next time you're listening to a podcast or the radio, or even just catching a headline while you walk by a TV, just take a second, ask yourself, am I getting the whole story here, or is my brain just zeroing in on the negative? Because that's what it's used to doing.
It's all about awareness.
Right. 100%.
Wow, this has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. The more we understand about how our brains work, the better equipped we are to make sense of the world around us.
I completely agree. And that's what this deep dive is all about. So until next time, folks, stay curious.
And stay informed.